Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a truly fascinating guide to modern romance. Imagine a world where finding the one isn't really about chasing, but more about attracting. It's a concept that might sound a little counterintuitive at first glance.
It really might. And what's compelling about this particular guide, The Surrendered Single, is how directly it challenges, so much of the conventional wisdom you hear about dating and relationships. It lays out a very specific philosophy, almost transformative, really.
Exactly. And our source material here, it isn't about those traditional dating rules or like quick tactics. It's much more about an internal shift. So our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the core insights and the practical steps from this guide. We want to show you how this idea of surrendering might just be the shortcut to the connection you've always wanted. So let's start right at the beginning, the core philosophy of this guide. It defines surrender in relationships in a way that might surprise some people. What does that actually mean when you apply it to dating? It sounds like it could be interpreted as, well, giving up.
That's a great question, actually, because it's precisely not about giving up. The guide makes it really clear that surrender here means recognizing that you just cannot control certain external things in relationships. Things like who asks you out or how they do it when they call you back, or even if they decide to commit.
Okay, so you can't control those things.
Right. So the shift is away from trying to control or manipulate or, force things, and it's towards deliberately positioning yourself to attract the right person. This means things like purposefully being quiet on first dates, not to play games, but to genuinely listen, learn about the other person, and stay connected with your own feelings.
Interesting. Being quiet to listen, not as a tactic.
Exactly. And it also involved letting go of that super rigid checklist of qualities for a partner. Accepting that happiness can actually be found with someone who's imperfect. The source does frame this surrender thing as initially pretty terrifying because of the vulnerability involved.
Right, vulnerability is often scary.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it promises these grand results. Fears melting away, discovering amazing men you might have overlooked, feeling adored, finding real intimacy. There's that powerful quote from Rainer Maria Rilke, something like, "For one human being to love another, that is perhaps the most difficult of our tasks."
The ultimate, the last test and proof, the work for which all other work is but preparation. Yeah, that really sets the stage.
It really does. It puts into perspective how profound and challenging this journey can be, but ultimately rewarding.
And part of that depth, it seems, involves confronting some internal obstacles. The guide suggests that a lack of faith and a fear of the unknown are common reasons really strong single women stay alone, even if they don't consciously think of themselves as scared. Why is that specific point so critical here?
It's critical because these internal blocks are often, well, invisible to us. We don't even realize they're there. The guide points out that we often create these super restrictive lists for partners based on external approval, like what our parents or friends would like.
So it's not even about our own desires sometimes.
Exactly, which makes the list kind of irrelevant to what we truly want and creates this energetic barrier. And then there's that common sentiment of, who needs a husband anyway? The source argues that embracing the single life can often be shorthand for just avoiding the risk of disappointment or the fear of future pain, like divorce.
So pretending to be perfectly happy single might actually be counterproductive if you do want a relationship.
That's the idea, pretending to be completely content, maybe to avoid feeling vulnerable or seeming less self-sufficient. It can actually send mixed signals. Your actions, your energy, might contradict your deepest desires without you even knowing it.
Okay, so once you've started to grasp this concept of internal surrender, how does that then ripple out? How does it change how you actually present yourself to the world? The guide then shifts to cultivating attractiveness, but maybe not in the ways you're used to thinking about it. Like, it suggests stopping male bashing and actively starting to admire men. How does that seemingly simple shift impact our ability to connect?
Oh, it's incredibly impactful because it gets right at a fundamental internal narrative. If you constantly put down men, maybe even just in jest or tell those kinds of jokes, you'll start to internalize those beliefs. It creates this subconscious barrier that can actually repel the very connection you say you want.
So it's not just about what you say out loud.
No, it's deeper. The advice isn't just about changing your words, but fundamentally rewiring your subconscious beliefs. Switching to a mantra like, "I love men," and surrendering to the idea that men have, complementary qualities. There was that quote, "Instead of always harping on a man's faults, tell him of his virtues." That shift in perspective is really foundational to attracting rather than chasing.
And that ties right into the power of vulnerability, doesn't it? The guide argues that authenticity, letting your guard down, admitting imperfections, the example given is like leaving the house with pantyhose stuck in your pants, or crying at a commercial is actually endearing, not repulsive. Why does admitting those small flaws make you more attractive?
Because it signals genuine humanity. It shows you're comfortable enough in your own skin to be real. That authenticity builds a powerful connection. It's also about communicating true feelings directly, like saying, I miss you, when you actually miss someone, instead of some veiled demand like, I want us to be closer.
Directness instead of manipulation.
Exactly. Direct, honest communication, even when it feels vulnerable, invites meaningful exchanges and ultimately deeper intimacy.
That's such a simple but really profound idea. And speaking of simple, the guide presents expressing gratitude as a form of flirtation. It suggests making a daily habit of expressing sincere gratitude or complimenting a man, even for small things, thanking the mail carrier or the AV guy at a seminar. How does such a small gesture translate into something so significant for attracting a partner?
Well, for one, it transforms your own outlook. And that makes you more approachable. Think about it. Everyone likes to be appreciated, right? So
Yeah.
when you sincerely express gratitude, it creates this positive ripple effect. It opens up interaction. It makes you feel good. And that positivity just radiates outward. It can potentially open doors for unexpected interactions. It's a very non-threatening, universally appealing way to signal openness.
Building on that openness, the guide debunks common myths about simply smiling at strangers. Many people might worry a smile could be misinterpreted as flirtatious or desperate or unprofessional even. But the guide says it's none of those things. What's the real power of just a simple smile in this context?
A smile is just a basic signal. It says, I'm open and friendly. Nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't imply anything beyond that basic human connection. The guide points out that embracing this simple act can lead to unexpected positive interactions. And interestingly, it genuinely builds your own confidence over time. It reminds me of that Disraeli quote, what we anticipate seldom occurs, what we least expected generally happens. Often, the best connections start from the simplest, most unburdened gestures.
Yeah, unexpected connections. And building on that idea of radiating confidence, the source talks about flate in a skirt. Which, okay, isn't just about literally wearing skirts, right? It's about choosing clothing that flatters and reveals your female form rather than hiding it. How does this specific advice connect back to the broader philosophy of surrender and attraction?
It's about expressing confidence from the inside out, which then translates into how you present yourself visually. The guide explicitly calls confidence seductive to men. So the importance here is putting yourself together so you feel attractive, so you radiate that assurance. When you feel good in your own skin and your clothing reflects that comfort and confidence, men are naturally encouraged to admire that energy. It's about radiating assurance, not just, showing skin.
Okay, that makes sense. So with those foundational shifts in mind, the internal work, the vulnerability, the gratitude, the openness, the guide then offers practical surrendered strategies for the modern dating world itself. And it begins with a concept many strong, independent women might find surprisingly challenging, the art of receiving.
Hmm.
What exactly does graciously accepting gifts and help entail, and why is it so important in this philosophy?
Right, this point is crucial because, modern women often feel this strong impulse to prove their independence by refusing help or always insisting on paying their share.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being a default for many.
Exactly. But the source suggests that when a man gives a gift, he actually finds pleasure in your presence, your warmth, your graciousness as reciprocation. Receiving, in this philosophy, allows more good things to come your way. The guide's mantra here is literally receive, receive, receive.
Receive, receive, receive. Okay.
And it explicitly states that rejecting gifts, because they aren't quite what you had in mind, like maybe you think he can't afford it or you wouldn't wear those particular shoes he picked, that's actually a form of control.
Control again.
Exactly. And that control can inadvertently emasculate a man and discourage intimacy. The guide really hammers this.
Yeah.
You truly can't control and receive at the same time. The only exception noted is if there are uncomfortable strings attached, like an unwanted kiss or something inappropriate.
So it sounds like it's about letting go of that woman in charge habit,
No.
which can easily carry over from work or managing kids into dating. The guide encourages learning to reveal qualities appropriate for the dating situation, allowing him to spoil you, and that actually makes him feel more masculine, so it's a mutual benefit.
Absolutely. It's presented as a mutual benefit. When you allow him to step into that role of giving, It empowers him, it enhances the dynamic, and it makes him feel more masculine and valued in that context. Then, the guide moves into online dating and this concept of casting a wide net. This means lowering the drawbridge, avoiding those overly specific or, frankly, impossible criteria in online dating profiles.
Like age down to the year, height to the inch, income level, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
precisely. Or personality type, even hair color. The guide really pushes against that. Why does it insist on this broader approach when many women feel those specific criteria are helpful, maybe even necessary?
Well, the guide argues because these strict criteria can rule out so many perfectly good men who just don't happen to fit a very narrow, preconceived mold. It uses an anecdote, Dina's story, where she got engaged to a man who was actually an inch shorter and 2 years younger than her specified criteria. It perfectly illustrates the point. It's about staying open to unexpected connections that might not tick every single box on that list you made.
Right. And when you're crafting that online profile itself, the advice is to present yourself plainly and playfully online. So the guide advises focusing on describing yourself playful, brief, inviting, rather than listing demands for a partner. And it recommends including a simple, clear, smiling photo of yourself alone, avoiding those blurry or moody or maybe overly suggestive images. What kind of signal does this plain and playful approach send, do you think?
It seems like it sends a signal of authenticity and approachability. You're showing who you are in a positive, inviting light instead of laying down this gauntlet of requirements for potential partners. That makes you seem much more open and less intimidating, I'd imagine.
Exactly. And this then leads us to the strategy of going on a date is not going into debt.
Hmm.
The guide encourages accepting all reasonable date offers, even if you initially think, there's no future with this person. Why does the guide push for this wide net approach to dating itself, even for seemingly unpromising dates?
Because it helps you cast a truly wide net and, crucially, lets go of those premature judgments and prejudices about who might actually be right for you. It's about learning more about yourself and others through the experience itself, even if that specific person isn't the one. Every interaction can potentially be valuable.
Okay. And then when a date or a connection doesn't work out, there's an art to declining dates with dignity.
Hmm.
When ending a budding relationship or just declining a second date, the guide suggests simply stating, I'm sorry, but I'm not available anymore. Why is this very concise approach preferred over giving lengthy explanations or justifications?
Well, the importance here is being clear and respectful, but not offering those lengthy explanations. Or worse, lying, like making up a phantom boyfriend or claiming you're just too busy, or
Yeah.
criticizing him, like saying you're not my type. This direct approach, while maybe it sounds a little cold to some at first, is meant to maintain integrity for both people and avoid unnecessary drama or ambiguity, and it swiftly creates space for the right man to come into your life. The guide even specifies that breaking up over the phone is acceptable, especially if he contacts you first. Clarity is ultimately kinder, right?
Clarity over ambiguity, definitely. Okay, so finally, let's explore nurturing a lasting surrendered connection once you've actually found someone promising. First, establishing healthy boundaries and support systems seems key. The guide strongly advises you end friendships with ex-boyfriends. Now, many people try to be civil or stay friends. Why does this guide take such a strong stance against it?
The source argues pretty forcefully that ex-boyfriends represent the past. They consume mental and emotional space that could be used for new connections. Maintaining those friendships, it suggests, prevents you from feeling the full sting of loneliness after a breakup, which is often what motivates you to get back out there and meet new people, to actively seek a new partner. It also warns, similarly, don't return to the scene of the crime, meaning don't try to win back an ex who was the one who initiated the breakup. That usually just leads to more emotional pain and a hit to your self-esteem. Close those old chapters.
Close little chapters, got it. Another crucial boundary the guide highlights is that you can control when you first have sex. This is entirely in your command. The guide suggests taking time, it mentions at least a month of dating, to really get to know someone better, for both physical and emotional safety. What are the deeper benefits of delaying physical intimacy, according to this guide?
Well, it argues that it significantly improves the chances for real romance because it allows the non-sexual aspects of the relationship, the emotional connection, the intellectual compatibility, the shared values to develop first. When you build that foundation, the physical intimacy then becomes a deeper expression of an already established connection rather than being the primary driver from the get-go.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And tying into that vulnerability we talked about earlier, the guide advises you to give up control of your image. This means disclosing potentially embarrassing or shameful personal details, things like past divorces, financial struggles, personal struggles before becoming sexually intimate. Why is this level of vulnerability so crucial at that particular stage?
Because, the logic goes, if he accepts you after hearing these things, the difficult things, it builds a far stronger emotional connection, and it removes future worries about him finding out later. You've presented your authentic self, warts and all, and his acceptance is then a powerful sign of genuine interest and potential commitment. It's about building a bond based on true acceptance, not just a polished facade.
Building on true acceptance. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's also crucial, the guide says, to keep your life even though he's in it. This means maintaining your existing friendships, your hobbies, your interest after meeting a new man. Why is this independence and balance so important for a healthy relationship?
Because, simply put, no single person can meet all your emotional needs. That's just too much pressure on one relationship. Maintaining your separate life ensures you remain a happy, well-rounded individual, and that ultimately makes the relationship itself healthier and more sustainable. It's about having that essential support network beyond just your partner.
Right, the support network. Which leads nicely to the next point. It takes a village to raise my spirits. It highlights the necessity of a strong support system of close girlfriends or women friends for support, laughter, conversation, and that unique female perspective, especially during tough times or periods of change. Why is this specific village of female friendships so essential, even when you're happily in a relationship?
Because these friendships strengthen through shared vulnerability, and they provide a unique kind of support that a romantic partner often simply cannot. They offer a different mirror, a different kind of understanding. It ensures you have diverse sources of emotional strength, so you're not relying solely on your partner for absolutely everything. It keeps things balanced.
Balanced, yeah. Okay, now let's talk about fostering mutual respect and growth within the relationship itself. The guide really stresses avoiding controlling behaviors, things like nagging or caretaking him too much, criticizing his driving, monitoring his health choices, commenting on his spending. How do these seemingly small acts actually undermine trust and dampen passion?
Well, they chip away at his autonomy, don't they? They make him feel managed, not loved or trusted. The guide argues this behavior actively undermines trust and dampens passion because it is a subtle form of control, even if it's well-intentioned. You're essentially communicating a lack of faith in his ability to make his own decisions, and that breeds resentment, not intimacy.
Resentment, right. And this extends even to gifts. Control disguised as a gift is still control. The guide warns against being overly eager with elaborate gifts or services, like throwing him huge surprise parties he didn't ask for, or cleaning his entire apartment if there's a hidden motive, like making him like you more, or feel obligated to you. What's the hidden danger in that kind of generosity?
This, the source says, just leads to agitation and distance. It's not a genuine gift if it comes with unspoken expectations or strings attached. A much better path, the guide suggests, is to simply honor his choices, even if they're not what you'd do. Like if he eats a candy bar for lunch or his room is a bit messy. It's about respecting his independence, not trying to subtly orchestrate his life for him.
Okay, respect his independence. On the flip side, though, becoming your best self will bring out the best in him. The guide suggests setting a positive tone by being the first to show appreciation, vulnerability, and acceptance. How does leading by example actually work in a relationship to encourage reciprocity?
Well, when you consistently model the behavior you want to see, appreciation, kindness, openness, you create an environment where your partner feels safe and hopefully encouraged to reciprocate those things. It's about inviting him to rise to the occasion by your own actions rather than pointing out all his faults. It's quietly powerful.
Quietly powerful, I like that.
Yeah.
This also means understanding that people need love most when they're the most unlovable.
Mm.
So the guide advises approaching a partner's moodiness or irritability with acceptance and kindness, rather than immediately trying to fix their mood or complaining about it. Why is this approach seen as more effective?
Because it gives them space to work through their own issues, often resolving them faster and without feeling pressured or criticized by you. It's about trusting him to manage his own feelings, even if he needs to retreat into his metaphorical cave for a bit. Your acceptance creates a safe space for him to process rather than making him feel controlled or judged for having a bad day.
Allowing space, okay. And a really interesting point the guide makes is that asking, "Are we compatible?" is the wrong question. It argues against moving in together solely to test compatibility, because conflict is just inevitable in any long-term relationship. So if compatibility isn't the right question, what is?
The guide asserts that the real question is whether you are both willing to stay and actually work through the differences when they inevitably arise. Compatibility isn't some static state you achieve, it's a dynamic process of navigating disagreements together. And a legal commitment like marriage, the guide suggests, can actually help reinforce that fundamental willingness to stay and work through things when it gets tough. It shifts the focus from avoiding conflict to resolving it constructively.
Okay, willingness to work through differences. Finally, the guide emphasizes the importance of seeking wise counsel. And it's very specific. Only happily married people can give you good relationship advice. Why such specificity? It suggests finding a marriage mentor, a woman whose marriage you truly admire.
Because they offer real-world proof of what successful surrender and partnership actually look like in practice. The guide suggests seeking out a woman whose marriage is characterized by things like laughter, mutual esteem, genuine physical affection. This trusted mentor can then offer sage advice about dating and marriage, provide reality checks, and help assuage fears based on their own lived experience. It's about learning from those who have successfully navigated the very path you're trying to walk.
hmm Learning from lived experience.
Mm.
So if we try to connect all this back to the bigger picture, the guide is really suggesting that surrendering isn't about weakness at all. It's about a deliberate, maybe even empowering shift in perspective and behavior, moving away from that need to control and towards trust, vulnerability, and gracious reception.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. What does this all mean for you, the listener? Ultimately, it seems to be about creating space both internally and externally for the right connection to actually find you and flourish. So here's a final provocative thought for you to consider. If letting go of control and embracing vulnerability can genuinely transform our approach to finding love, how might these same principles of receptivity, trust, and authentic self-expression apply to other significant areas of our lives? Think about things like career goals or creative pursuits where we often feel compelled to exert maximum control. What might change if we applied a little surrender there too?